Hey everyone, Joey here, aka Animus, and this channel now has 1,000 subscribers, which is absolutely surreal to me. Like, whatever it seems like in the grander scheme of YouTube, this means the absolute world to me. I cannot stress enough how grateful I am to every single one of you for the love and support. It really feels like this little side venture of mine has turned into something real, and I'm so happy that people seem to enjoy watching these videos as much as I enjoy making them. Things are definitely not slowing down from here. So a few days back I took to various social media platforms and asked you to ask me basically whatever you want. So why don't we do a fun little Q&A and you can learn whatever you want to learn about me. First off, Buffalo Staple aka Vale Smith, who I'm very happy to see here, asks me who my top 5 rappers are. And I'm a little bit nervous given I'm like a very surface level hip-hop fan and I'm talking to an expert on the subject, but I'll just go off what I'm personally enjoying the most at the moment. First I'm actually gonna go Little Simz, who I just think is one of the most powerful and exciting young voices in the genre at the moment. I loved her last few records and seeing her live definitely cemented my feelings on her as a bit of a modern great, honestly. Then I'm gonna go Nas. I can't really speak for his wider discography, but purely off hearing Illmatic, I thought that was a fantastic front-to-back experience, and I definitely see why it has such a status as one of the best rap albums of the 20th century and of all time. Then I guess Andre 3000? I'm on a bit of an Outcast fix as of late. Such a colourful and versatile creative mind in his rapping and songwriting and producing. But even if we're purely just going off rapping abilities and flow and lyrics, I'd say he deserves to be up here. Then I guess MF Doom, for the reasons that I probably will not need to explain if you're enough of a music nerd to be on this corner of the internet. Such an incredible talent with a whole weird and wonderful musical universe of his own. And then, cold take, but it's gotta be Kendrick Lamar, just for creating 2 of the greatest albums of the 21st century so far in Good Kid, Mad City and To Pimp a Butterfly. He's completely unmatched, and I'd say he's my favourite rapper at the moment. Josh M asks if I have any exciting things planned for the future. Well, the channel's definitely not slowing down, as I said. I'm definitely going to keep putting as much energy into it as I can manage with being in 6th form at the moment. Things might take time, but I'd rather the finished product was as good as it can possibly be. In terms of music, the album is still coming. I know it's been a very long time and it's been very slow at gathering momentum, but I have ambitious ideas and very little time, so even though I've definitely been devoting more of my headspace to this channel, what with Patreon and everything, than to my music, things are absolutely developing, and fingers crossed, we're looking at a kind of late summer, early autumn release date. I'm gonna be so excited to share this stuff with you, and hopefully it'll be pretty exciting to listen to as well. B. Wells asks, favourite parentheses electronic film soundtrack? Well, if you're asking purely electronic music, it's this one. Really no question about that at all. One of the greatest examples in film history of music being completely integral to the film's world and atmosphere and emotional qualities. You cannot imagine Blade Runner without Vangelis's work, and it's one of the key reasons why this is one of my personal favourite films of all time. But there's lots of great soundtracks out there that don't quite work as albums removed from the film context, but this is absolutely not one of them. Just putting this on the turntable on its own, it's such an enveloping, futuristic sound world that still sounds so fantastic for an 80s record. Just as an album, it's some of my favourite music of the 1980s, and I guess some of my favourite electronic music, full stop. So I'd probably also say that it's my favourite film soundtrack, full stop, but there are some other contenders outside of the electronic sphere. Howard Shore's Lord of the Rings soundtrack is absolutely staggering in scale and detail. Once again, it really makes the world come alive of those films, and if you really take the time to listen to the 3-hour plus complete editions of each film soundtrack, all these hundreds of motifs just absolutely recreate that journey that takes place in the film in your mind, taking you through all these different realms just through the experience of the music. Howard Shorter practically have just retired after creating that. I'm also a big fan of Joe Hisaishi's work with Studio Ghibli. Spirited Away here is absolutely gorgeous and tear-jerking to listen to. But also Princess Mononoke is a huge highlight if you're looking for something more vast and epic sounding. And in terms of something more recent, I guess I'll also give a shout out to the Dune soundtracks by Hans Zimmer for making for just one of the most organ-rattling cinema experiences ever, with that second film in particular, which just left me absolutely buzzing. And they're also so creative and perfectly alien sounding to bring Frank Herbert's world alive. Can you see a running theme here? So yeah, film scores are great and people should definitely check them out on their own terms more. You absolutely made me go off on one there. Good question. Louis Coventry says, congrats on 1K. If you could only bring 3 albums to a desert island, what would they be? Classic question there, and it would be easy just to pick my 3 favourite albums of all time, but you've really got to think about what the experience would actually be like of being on a desert island. So first off, a pretty easy pick is going to be BT's This Binary Universe, because it is just probably my favourite album of all time. Imagining When Night Falls just gazing up into a clear sky of stars would be an absolute dream and make me just drift off into the world of the album and forget the awfulness of the situation for a while. And then I also think Avalanche's Since I Left You would fit the situation very well. Of course, being by the water, but also with the themes on the album of carrying on after leaving someone behind. It would fit perfectly in that scenario, I think, and it's melancholic but also very optimistic, which I definitely need. So that's all instrumental music, but I definitely need to hear someone's voice to comfort me, and I'd say there'd be no better voice for that than Porter Robinson, because this album just absolutely touches my heart in such a unique way and makes me feel like everything's going to be okay. So I think that set of 3 albums would make being on a desert island feel a lot better. Melody Wright asks, what's my favourite song of all time? It's so difficult for me just to name one piece of music as the one that has the most meaning to me, but I'd say the one piece of music with the most depth and breadth of emotions that it brings out in me would have to be Long Season by Fishmans, including a 35-minute track that also doubles as a full LP. It's kind of a funny thing to do for choosing your favourite song of all time, but it's straight up just one of the most heavenly things to ever grace the ears of music listeners. Going through all these different movements, making for one giant beautiful journey that just never fails to give me chills or even push me close to tears sometimes. And if you're looking at the live version from 1998, then that's even better. Slightly longer runtime still, and the midsection is very different, this time just sounding like you're ascending up among the clouds or something. And the fact that this was the last piece of music that Shunji Sato ever performed is just utterly heartbreaking and elevates this already incredible piece of music to a whole new level of meaning. It just absolutely makes me want to break down in tears, honestly. Marg Ross, sorry if that's completely not how you're meant to pronounce it, asks, what's my favourite Sigur Ros record and why? I've been big into this band for a while now, so I'm glad you asked this question. I know a lot of the fans would say their album with the fetus on the cover, but actually personally I think I'd go with Tak. They've created so much spacey, weightless, ethereal music, but in contrast, I just feel this album sounds so earthy and grounded and textured and organic. It's absolutely beautiful. There's so many incredible emotional climaxes on this album that make it one of the most moving experiences in post-rock in my opinion. Shout out to this absolutely gorgeous pressing as well. Ryan Wire asks, how did you get into electronic music in the very beginning? And I wish I had more of a poetic story about this, but the very first time I remember enjoying a piece of electronic music was actually hearing the band Galantis on the radio in 2015, which is kind of funny to me because, looking back, this band's taste in making dance music is kind of questionable in places, but it was just hearing the track Runaway You and I that was really my first exposure to hearing dance music and definitely ignited a little spark in me, which led me to look further into the genre. So because it was the mid-2010s, most of what I was aware of was big EDM and dubstep acts like Avicii, Skrillex, Major Lazer, but eventually I did start looking further back and got into Daft Punk, and looking up a review of one of their albums, I found The Wonky Angle, whose channel I am so grateful for being such a gateway into all different kinds of amazing electronic music, much of which is still among my favourite music of all time to this day. So through listening to who his favourite bands were, I found Orbital, BT, The Avalanches, Aphex Twin, etc, etc, just keeping on branching out into all the different things the genre has to offer, and the rest is history. So I wish I had a slightly better story to tell, but basically it was EDM and YouTube. Zacharias Adamson says, congrats on 1k, thank you. What's your favourite book? I love this question. Glad I get to talk about things I like outside of music. I'm still trying to make more and more space in my life to read rather than, you know, idly scrolling or whatever. But I'm a big fan of fantasy and sci-fi, as you've probably gauged from me talking about my taste in films. And I would probably say that my favourite book at the moment is Lord of the Rings. I gradually went through this thing over the course of like 6 months non-stop, and it was just a beautiful experience from front to back. I went book before films, and as much as I love those films, there's just such a special kind of musical quality to Tolkien's prose that elevates the whole thing to such an elegant level. I don't think anyone has ever completely devoted themselves to crafting every intricacy of a vast fantasy world to this extent. You know, he kind of made Middle-earth his life's work, and it absolutely pays off. You definitely get a sense of the influence that epic poetry had on him. It's kind of in that tradition, but it was also basically responsible for kickstarting the fantasy genre as we know it today, and some people would try to tell you it's overly stuffy and long-winded, and sure, I completely understand if you're a reader who doesn't like to go deep into every little aspect of journey and what all these places look, sound, smell, and feel like, but I want to step out of reality when I read a book, and I just never wanted to leave this world. I genuinely teared up multiple times reading this book, and I think it's just one of my favourite pieces of art out there in the world. Aside from that, I'm also really enjoying the Dune series, as I kind of touched on, and also delving into Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere. I'm also planning on starting the Wheel of Time pretty soon, which is going to be very exciting. Just in case you were looking for something more music related though, I'd say probably my favourite book on music I've ever read would be Future Days by David Stubbs, about krautrock and other experimental German music, which completely hooked me a few years back when I was getting into that sort of thing, and I even decided to write a dissertation for school on rock and pop music in post-war Germany, and this has been an absolute touchstone for that. But even just on its own, if you're a fan of the genre or looking to expand your horizons in terms of rock music, it's a super digestible and entertaining read. When is my next album dropping? I ask myself the same thing every day. And finally, which do I prefer, Pink Floyd or the Beatles? Loaded question there. I absolutely do enjoy listening to the Beatles' music and have all the respect in the world for their creativity and influence. But if we're really just looking at the amount of musical enjoyment these bands have given me, there's kinda no question, it's Pink Floyd. They just offered such a deep well of emotive, powerful, psychedelic, sprawling experiences, and all sorts of music that was as innovative for its time as it is enjoyable today. The music being several decades old and, you know, people hearing things that have been influenced by it before they hear the original is much less of a problem with Pink Floyd as I'd say it is for the Beatles. At the end of the day, they're two totally different entities and I don't like comparing them, and I really enjoy both of them, but yeah, it is Pink Floyd for me. We've also got 3 questions from Windowless Real, who says, have you listened to any albums by Oval? Yes, I have. I absolutely love 94 Discount. It's just one of the most delicate, textured, beautiful, gorgeous sounding ambient albums ever made. The opener Do While is definitely a go-to for me if I'm falling asleep or reading something and just want something nice and gentle in the background, but also if you listen actively, there's so many lovely tiny textures, and it's almost like ASMR, just how calming and tactile all the different sounds are. Thank you for reminding me about Oval, because I haven't thought about them for a while, and I definitely need to go back and give some of their later, more experimental work another try. Will I ever do physical releases of any of my albums? I'd absolutely love to. I've been investigating various options for vinyl for quite some time now, and there are definitely some complications. You need to actually put in quite a decently big order, and I'd have to be confident that I'd actually get 100 odd people willing to spend quite a large sum of money on my music. Maybe I could try crowdfunding or something, but I'd just definitely have to be confident that the audience was there. Also, particularly if you're making it a nice item, it gets very expensive very quickly. I could be barely profiting anything and things would still very much look on the expensive side. So for vinyl, I would love to release things like that one day, hopefully, if people will want it. But CDs are luckily a lot easier, and I do plan on putting my next album out on CD. So if you enjoy my music and you're a collector of physical items such as myself, then you can definitely look forward to that. And finally, any favourite CDs I own? Well, there's definitely more vinyl that I could easily point to as something special, but CDs can be just as cool. I've already shown this off, but yeah, BT's This Binary Universe is my favourite album of all time, and this is also just a beautiful item right here, this Morse code slipcase, and the CD and the DVD of short films, music videos for every track on the album, in surround sound, if only I could experience that. And also this isn't on Spotify or Bandcamp or any streaming services I use, which makes this definitely an item that I cherish very much. Apart from that, I'll just go through a handful of cool things you might be interested in seeing. I've got this hybrid Light of the Fearless box set with 5 different CDs in it, the original album, instrumental and orchestral versions, bonus tracks, and a CD single. Really cool stuff. Joanna Newsom's East is just another really gorgeously presented CD with all this lovely texture and imagery, and this is another album that you need to get physically to listen to. Got a few signed items such as this Orbital Optical Delusion CD, and I also love it when you get these little kind of book type things like Pretty Lights, A Color Map of the Sun, which shows the whole process of making the album, and it's also got a bonus disc of live sessions and the recording of the album. And Chemical Brothers Further is very much kind of audio visual with videos for each track and all this really cool otherworldly imagery. Thank you for reminding me to appreciate CDs. And to finish things up, I've got a few questions from Ethereal Bonds, who says, if I could only choose 5 records of different genres to listen to for the rest of my life, which ones would those be and why? Now, that's definitely a lot harder than just saying 5 albums, because obviously electronic music is a huge part of my musical diet and the stuff that has connected with me the most, but if we're looking at that as one entity and I've just got to choose one album, once again it's gonna just be TBU for just summing up everything I love about music and taking me places mentally and emotionally that are difficult to reach in any other way. And then I'd love to keep Nurture, but I think it would be a stretch to call it pop rather than electronic. So if we're gonna go for a pop or art pop record, I'm tempted to go with some Björk, like Vespertine or Homogenic, but I think it's gonna be Kate Bush. Hounds of Love is, like, musically speaking, her best album, I'd say, but actually, I think I'm gonna go with Ariel, which is, in my eyes, an outrageously underappreciated masterpiece, and a record with lots and lots of substance over the course of its two halves, which I'm definitely gonna appreciate if I'm only able to listen to 5 albums, but also just an incredible level of personal meaning. It reminds me of home and family and childhood. It goes a long way back with me, all the way back to when my parents used to play it. So I'd have to hold on to this one. For rock, I'm almost leaning towards Can's Targo Margo, but it's gonna have to be the Fishman's live album. I've already talked at length about Long Season, but that whole 2-hour experience is just on another level, totally ethereal and elevating, and once again the sheer scale of awesome substance on there is incredible. I'll bring in some hip-hop and take Kendrick Lamar's To Pimp a Butterfly for above-mentioned reasons, and for some jazz, it's tempting to go for Kamasi Washington's The Epic, because it is awesome and 3 hours long, but you can't beat a bit of Miles Davis. Of course, he's got loads of amazing, more experimental stuff, but Kinda Blue is just such a tight distillation of everything that makes jazz music great. And maybe I could try and justify taking something like Nick Drake as like folk, but why not pick a classical album? Promises by Floating Points, Pharoah Sanders and the London Symphony Orchestra is definitely up there, but it's kinda only 1/3 classical, so I don't think that would properly fit into that category. I'm gonna go for Sibelius Symphony No. 5, which is incredibly powerful, sweeping, and beautiful, and I guess just the piece of classical music that I'm most feeling like holding on to at this point in time. Top 5 records of the 90s, 2000s, and 2010s. This question could be asking for a top 5 of that 30-year span, but I'm pretty sure you're asking for individual top 5s, so once again, super loaded question, but off the top of my head and in no particular order. Just for me personally, the 90s, I'm gonna go Orbital's Inside, and I would add Orbital 2, but I'm going one album per artist. Fishman's Long Season would be the live album, but we're going studio LPs. Oh my god, this is hard. Then I'll go Homogenic by Björk. Selected Ambient Works Volume 2 by Aphex Twin, and then I'll stop myself there with the electronic music, and I guess go Loveless by My Bloody Valentine? Sure, why not? Even though I could definitely go on at length about how 90s electronic music is just the greatest thing to ever be. Then for the 2000s, This Binary Universe, Since I Left You, Solar Fields Leaving Home, actually, which I just think is probably the greatest Sybient album of all time, just slightly edging out carbon-based life forms for me. Then I'll go Daft Punk's Discovery and Kate Bush Ariel. And for the 2010s, I'm thinking John Hopkins Immunity, C418's Minecraft Volume Alpha, which is just a super special album to me. I'll just let BT's These Hopeful Machines take a spot here because I have a super back and forth relationship with that album, but it's undeniably a very important album in my history as a music listener and contains many ideas that I think are just flat out spectacular. Oh my god, this is so difficult because there's so many I want to talk about. Don't take this too seriously. We'll go Hybrid Disappear here. And there's so many different things I want to add here, like Daft Punk, or Swans, or Orteka. I don't want to come across as some kind of wonky angle clone, but it's gonna have to be the Avalanche's Wildflower. I'd say those top 5s work out nicely. I somehow forgot to answer this final question about how to find small and underground music artists. It's kind of a difficult one. I'm definitely not, like, one to give out any kind of expert advice on this, but speaking for myself personally, there's just often being immersed in a particular corner of the internet, you know, people giving recommendations and knowing people personally. Features and collaborations with artists you like is a very obvious one, but also going out to lots of gigs and seeing the support acts. I've discovered a few different bands and artists who I'm now a fan of by watching the smaller acts at festivals. I definitely agree that being able to find these kinds of artists is very important as a music fan. And yeah, sorry if I haven't been able to add much to the conversation, but that's what works for me, I've found. So there you have it. I hope this hasn't gone on too long when I edit everything down, but I've had a really fun time just chatting on all these different topics. I definitely hope that I've answered your questions well and that it's also been enjoyable for you guys. Once again, just thank you all so much for being there and letting me reach this point. It warms my heart and is incredibly exciting, looking forward to the future. But for now, thank you for watching. See you next time.